Today we are counting down the top 10 most valuable and important DC Comics published with a cover date from the year 1975. You will notice on my master chart here that the top 10 books are worth $95 in near mint 9.2 raw condition in the Overstreet Annual Price Guide or higher. And yes, of course, graded comics. You can go check out the GP analysis and eBay sales, Heritage, etc., to find record-breaking sales for super high-grade copies. Let's dive in. We're going to analyze these comics, find out why they're in the top 10 most important comics of the year. In 10th place, it's first issue special, number 8. It's the origin and first appearance of the Warlord. This was a big hyped-up new character in 1975. This has been a key issue for decades. It has Mike Grell cover and art. There is a Chris Bell pedigree copy grading 9.6 CGC, and believe it or not, there is actually a 9.9 graded of this book. Print run is estimated at approximately 100,000 copies, which would be average for a comic at this time for DC. That's not a major big title. The book ranks 10th of the year and 243rd most valuable DC comic of the entire decade of the 1970s. You can see on the CG census that demand is definitely there for this book. In the last 5 years, we can see the census has almost doubled, 431 copies graded, now a whopping 109 high-grade copies, 9.6 or higher. Heritage Auctions has only sold 8 copies, though, in the last 2 decades. Classic cover art says first DC issue on the cover, as well as issue number 8. In the Overstreet Annual Price Guide, we can see the price growth for all grades for raw copies over the last 5 years. Still pretty cheap book, so not a lot of movement at all in lower grades, but slowly sneaking up in higher grades raw. On the census, we can see the 9.9. There are 16 9.8s and 92 9.6s. So consider this when we compare all these books of just how common they are on the census or uncommon, and you can see which books dealers and collectors are really focusing on. In 9th place of the year, it is Joker number 2. The Joker debuted his short-lived series this year. It ran for 5 issues. This is number 2. The Joker was the first DC villain to get his own running series. We have an Ernie Chan cover and Irv Novick art on this issue. It ranks high of the year, 233rd of the decade. Print run also estimated at about 100,000 copies. There are 253 copies graded by CGC. 64 of them are 9.6 or higher. Heritage has sold 10 copies of this nice action cover, bold blue background. So you can see spine wear very easily on this book. In the Overstreet Price Guide, you can see small growth, but just a little bit of a bump up in higher grades. On the census, there are 17 9.8s, 47 9.6s. In 8th place of the year, oh, I skipped a book. That was number 8. Number 9 is Weird Western Tales, number 29. And this is an interesting book. It is the origin of Jonah Hex and the first appearance of character Quentin Turnbull. It is the 20th appearance of Jonah Hex since he first debuted in 1972. This is a cover story feature of him, as it had been for a couple of years now. Print run was 152,000 copies. This title was pretty popular. Of course, it led to Jonah Hex getting his own ongoing series in 1977. So this predates his own title. There are only 39 copies graded by CGC. There are 10 9.6 or higher. Heritage only sold 1 copy. This being a non-superhero book, it actually appears to be very scarce. In the Overstreet Price Guide, it is stalled at the moment in all grades in recent years. On the census, 1 9.8, 9 9.6s. This is a tough book. Jonah Hex books generally have a higher price tag because they actually are so much harder to find in high grade than superhero books of the same time period. All right, now that I'm back on track, number 7 of the year starts a trend we will see with most of the books on our list. This is a 100-page super spectacular issue. This was common for DC in many titles in 1974, 1975, but it was winding down. These were the last issues, and this is the last Detective 100-page giant. Now, you have to consider comics at this time were 25 cents. So if you equate that to like a $4 cover price now, well, this is more than double So this would be like a $9 cover price. So you kind of wonder that this couldn't have been widely ordered. But obviously the series was popular because they made a lot of 100-page giants at this time period. We have Jim Aparo cover art. Dr. Midnight has a Golden Age story reprinted. We've also got appearances of Ra's al Ghul, Talia al Ghul, and Jack Ryder. And there's a Robin backup story. Print run was 145,000 copies. At this time, Detective Comics was actually considered a fairly poor seller for DC. Book ranked 7th of the year now, 197th of the decade. There are only 63 copies graded, 8 high grade, and Heritage has sold 6. Because these are much thicker comics, a lot of damage to the binding of these spines. We see not much growth in the book, just a little bump up in higher grades. On the census, there is 1 9.8, 7 9.6s. Next on our countdown, in 6th place, we get another 100-page giant. But this is Young Love 114. This is the last 100-page issue of this particular romance title aimed at female readers, mostly at this time period. You can imagine not many of these copies saved because the girls definitely read them and didn't keep them in good condition. So print run was popular and high at this time, 128,000. So if you consider that, Young Love was selling almost as much as Detective Comics month by month at this time period. This ranks 6th of the year, 151st of the decade. There are only 4 copies graded by CGC, no super high grade copies. Heritage has sold 4 copies. This has a complete white background cover, making this super tough and high grade. And usually copies have spine damage again. Not much movement at all again in lower grades, just slow bumps up in higher grades. The highest graded copy is a 9.4 of this book. These romance books are really tough to find. Next on our list, in 5th place, we have Batman 261. This is another 100-page issue. Nick Cardy cover, Irv Novick and Dick Giordano artwork, interior. Print run estimated 193,000. Of course, the Batman main title was selling a bit better. Still not huge numbers, but definitely bigger than everything we've seen so far. This book ranks 5th of the year, 123rd of the decade. 118 copies graded, because of course there's a lot of Batman collectors and completists. 31 super high grade copies. So it is possible to find high grade copies of these 100-page giants. 11 copies sold by Heritage. Notice this one also has a white background cover. So a lot of covers will kind of get slowly stained and probably turn a bit creamy colored. No movement in the Overstreet Price Guide at all in any grades in the last couple of years. There are 12 9.8s and 19 9.6s in this one. Next on our countdown, in 4th place. Now here's a tough one to find. Young Romance 204. This is the last 100-page issue of this title. And they did 8 of them for this Young Romance title. There is a Savannah pedigree copy grading 9.2 at CGC. Print run estimated 130,000 copies a month. Ranks 4th of the year, 159th of the decade. Only 5 copies graded, no high-grade copies. Heritage has only sold 1 copy of this reddish background cover. And in the Overstreet Price Guide, just a slight bump in all grades, but just a slow casual increase. And there are 2 9.2s on the census. That's the best copies we get. And followed by that, in 3rd place, we have Young Romance Comics number 203. This is the 7th issue that was a 100-page issue. There's a Savannah pedigree copy of this one, grading 9.0 at CGC. Print run, again, estimated 130,000 copies, 158th of the decade. 8 copies graded, only 1 high-grade copy. Heritage has sold 1. Yellow background cover on this one. So again, can you imagine somebody paying $9 US every single month to buy copies of these romance books? Unbelievable. But it was a different era. It wouldn't happen now. Again, slow growth in all grades, but slow and steady. There is a 9.6 and 3 9.0s of this book. Next on our countdown, we were up to the big top 2. Batman 260 is in 2nd place. It features a Joker cover and story. And we also got Two-Face appearing. Nick Cardy cover art, Irv Novick and Dick Giordano art, interior, print run estimated 193,000 copies. Ranks in the top 100 most valuable DC Comics of the 70s. So we're getting into the bigger books now. 122 copies graded, including 19 high grade. Heritage has sold 10 of a red background cover. And no movement at all in low grade for years, and just a slight bump up in the highest grades this past year. There is a 9.8 and 18 9.6s. That brings us up to the most valuable and important DC comic of 1975. It is the Joker #1. The Joker gets his own series. And potentially this was planned to be a long-term ongoing series. Perhaps sales were low, and that's why it was canceled after 5 issues. That I'm not certain of. But first DC villain to get his own series. This issue also features Two-Face, Catwoman, Penguin, and the Riddler. We got Dick Giordano cover and art. Ranks #1 of the year, 75th most valuable DC comic of the decade. Print run estimated 125,000. Might be higher. Over 2,100 copies graded by CGC. 454 9.6s or higher. Heritage has sold 152. This is a major book. In the Overstreet Price Guide, you can see strong growth in all grades. This book is moving. Demand is high. The census is filling up like crazy with 124 9.8. It's incredible. So what we're going to do now is look at the top 10 books as they rank on the CGC census. And you can really tell which books are the ones that collectors are going after. And of course, the Joker #1 really is the only super key book on this list with over 2,000 copies graded. After that, it's actually the first appearance of Warlord in first issue special #8 that has 431 copies graded. After that, it's the Joker #2, has a lot of copies graded. And then, of course, Batman have decent numbers. But of course, as predicted, the romance and the Western titles are very small on the census in general. First issue special #8 is the only book that has a 9.9 on the census. The most common book on the census in high grade, of course, is Joker #1 with 124 9.8s. So the copies are out there. People are continually getting books of this era graded. A lot aren't graded yet because, again, most of these books are still actually quite cheap. So most collectors and dealers are not focusing on getting books in this price range. They don't really want to get books graded that are worth less than $100 that only move up $5 a year in the guide. And of course, the romance ones are the rarest ones by far on the list, almost no copies graded. And Young Romance 204 is the rarest one, with a 9.2 being the highest grade. Well, we continue our series continually, going year by year, looking at the history of DC and Marvel Comics. So please subscribe to this channel. Check out hundreds of videos I've already posted where you can learn some comic book history and investing tips. Thanks for watching.